The fluorescent lights of the classroom hummed, a monotonous drone that seemed to amplify the suffocating stillness. Nia Forrester sat hunched in her chair, a small island in a sea of indifferent faces. Her fingers traced the worn edges of her textbook, the rough texture a small comfort in the vast, echoing emptiness of the room. Mr. Buckley, the PE teacher, stood at the front, his booming voice bouncing off the cinderblock walls. "All right, folks," he announced, clapping his hands together with a theatrical flourish. "We've got spots open for the talent show. Singers, dancers, magicians, whatever you got, bring it." A ripple of excited murmurs spread through the classroom, the energy bypassing Nia completely. She remained shrouded in her self-imposed invisibility, a ghost in her own life. She'd heard the whispers, the snickers, the way their gazes slid past her as if she were made of air. It was a familiar ache, a constant hum beneath the surface of her days. Nia's gaze drifted to the window, where a solitary bird perched on a branch, its small body silhouetted against the gray sky. She envied its freedom, its ability to simply fly away. The bird took flight, its wings a blur against the glass, leaving Nia tethered to the suffocating reality of the classroom. Miss Dorsey, the math teacher, her lips curved into a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, gestured in Nia's direction. "What about our little violinist over there?" The words, seemingly innocuous, hung in the air, thick with unspoken mockery. Nia's stomach clenched. She knew that smile. It was the smile of a predator toying with its prey. A chorus of snickers erupted, the sound like shards of glass piercing the fragile silence. Nia's knuckles whitened as she gripped the edge of her desk, the wood digging into her skin. She could feel their eyes on her, probing, dissecting. Each laugh was a tiny pinprick, deflating her already dwindling sense of self. Mr. Buckley chuckled, adding fuel to the fire. "Yeah, come on, Forrester, show us what that thing can really do." His words echoed Miss Dorsey's, a double-edged sword of feigned encouragement and thinly veiled derision. They thought they were being funny, harmless, but their casual cruelty was a weight, a constant pressure that threatened to crush her beneath its unrelenting force. Nia's breath hitched, a small gasp trapped in her throat. Her mind raced, a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Humiliation warred with a strange, unfamiliar surge of defiance. They wanted a show? Fine, they would get one. The silence stretched, taut and brittle. Nia's grip tightened on the worn handle of her violin case, the smooth leather a comforting anchor in the storm raging within her. It was more than just an instrument. It was an extension of herself, a vessel for the emotions she couldn't articulate, the words she couldn't speak. It was her voice, and she would use it. "I'll do it," she said, the words barely a whisper, yet somehow they cut through the expectant hush of the classroom. The sound seemed to surprise even her. It was small, quiet, but laced with an unexpected steel. A flicker of something surprise, perhaps, or even a hint of unease crossed Miss Dorsey's face. Mr. Buckley, oblivious, simply beamed. "Excellent," he boomed, rubbing his hands together. "That's what I like to hear. We'll put you down for Friday then, Forrester." He turned back to the board, dismissing her as quickly as he had summoned her, leaving Nia alone again in the sudden, heavy silence. The bell rang, its shrill cry a welcome interruption. Nia gathered her things, her movements precise and deliberate. She avoided eye contact as she walked out of the classroom, the weight of their gazes a physical presence on her back. The walk home was a blur of gray sidewalks and indifferent faces. Nia's mind replayed the scene in the classroom, each word, each laugh, a fresh wound. She reached for the familiar comfort of her music, her fingers itching to draw the bow across the strings, to release the torrent of emotions swirling within her. Inside her small apartment, a different kind of silence reigned. The quiet hum of the refrigerator, the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. These were the sounds of home, of sanctuary. Her mother, Monica, was at work, her younger brother, Miles, engrossed in a cartoon, his childish laughter a fleeting balm to her raw nerves. Nia retreated to her room, the familiar space a haven from the judging eyes of the world. She closed the door behind her, the click of the latch a small, reassuring sound. Finally alone, she opened her violin case, the rich, dark wood gleaming under the soft light. The instrument seemed to pulse with a life of its own, a silent invitation. She lifted the violin, the smooth wood cool against her skin, and tucked it beneath her chin. Closing her eyes, she drew the bow across the strings, the first notes a hesitant whisper, then swelling into a torrent of sound. The music filled the small room, weaving its way through the silence, a tapestry of sorrow and defiance, of fear and burgeoning hope. She poured all her emotions into the music, the frustration, the humiliation, the simmering anger, and the fragile, nascent sense of power that had sparked within her in that classroom. Miles peeked into her room, his eyes wide with curiosity. "What ya playing, Nia?" he asked, his voice soft, innocent. Nia didn't stop playing. She couldn't. The music was a lifeline, a way to breathe, to exist. It was her voice, finally unleashed, finally free. And in that moment, in the sanctuary of her own room, surrounded by the music that was her solace and her shield, Nia Forrester was no longer invisible. The muted hum of the refrigerator was the apartment's constant soundtrack, a low thrumming against the peeling paint of the kitchen wall. Nia stood at the counter, a bowl of instant ramen steaming faintly before her. She ate mechanically, her gaze drifting towards the worn violin case propped against the chipped formica table. Practice. Always practice. The melody she'd been working on snagged at the edges of her thoughts, a restless ghost. Her mother's exhaustion clung to the air, thick and palpable, another familiar note in the symphony of their small lives. Monica Forrester worked double shifts at the diner, her hands perpetually chapped and smelling faintly of grease and stale coffee. Nia knew the weight of each penny, the cost of each string, the silent bargain they struck between necessity and passion. She pushed the half-eaten noodles away, the knot in her stomach tightening. The talent show. Miss Dorsey's sneer echoed in her ears, a dissonant chord that refused to fade. Why subject herself to that scrutiny, that casual dismissal? The thought of standing on stage, exposed and vulnerable, sent a shiver down her spine. But beneath the fear, a flicker of defiance ignited. Maybe it was time they saw her, really saw her, not just the quiet girl who faded into the background. The violin case creaked open, the scent of aged wood and rosin rising to meet her. Her fingers traced the smooth curves of the instrument, a familiar comfort. It was more than just wood and strings. It was an extension of her soul, a conduit for the emotions she couldn't voice. Let the instrument tell your truth when you can't. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her memory, his gentle hands guiding hers over the fingerboard. He was gone now, another absence that resonated in the quiet spaces of their lives. But the music remained, a tangible link to his memory, a legacy she carried within her. The melody poured out, filling the cramped apartment with its mournful beauty. Her brother, Miles, peeked around the corner, his eyes wide with a mixture of curiosity and awe. He rarely interrupted her practice, sensing, with a child's intuitive understanding, the sanctity of those moments. He tiptoed closer, clutching a worn teddy bear, his presence a silent offering of companionship. She offered him a small, hesitant smile, a crack in the wall of her concentration. For a moment, the anxieties receded, replaced by the pure, unadulterated joy of the music. Later that evening, as her mother sat hunched over a pile of bills, Nia hesitantly broached the subject of the talent show. Monica's weary gaze lifted, a flicker of concern in her eyes. "You sure you want to do this, Nia?" The question wasn't a challenge, but a gentle probing, a mother's instinct to protect her child from the harsh realities of the world. Nia's fingers tightened around the strap of her violin case. "I already said yes," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. The words felt heavy, weighted with unspoken anxieties and a desperate yearning for something more. Monica sighed, the lines on her face deepening. You don't gotta prove nothing to people who don't even see you. Her voice was laced with a quiet bitterness, the weariness of someone who had spent a lifetime navigating the world's indifference. Nia looked down at her hands, the calluses a testament to her dedication. "I guess me," she whispered, the words catching in her throat. It wasn't about proving anything to them, not really. It was about proving something to herself. It was about finding her voice in a world that seemed determined to silence her. The days that followed were a blur of practice, each note a step further out of the shadows and into the light. The apartment became her sanctuary, the music her shield against the whispers and stares that followed her in the school hallways. She poured her anxieties, her hopes, her dreams into the melody, shaping them into something tangible, something beautiful. The fear remained, a constant hum beneath the surface, but it was no longer paralyzing. It was fuel, a driving force that pushed her to refine each phrase, to perfect each nuance. Miles would often sit quietly in the corner, listening with rapt attention. Sometimes he would hum along, his small voice a gentle counterpoint to the soaring notes of the violin. In those moments, Nia felt a sense of connection, a shared understanding that transcended words. He saw her, truly saw her, and that was enough. It was a small, quiet validation in a world that often felt overwhelmingly indifferent. It was a reminder that even in the midst of the noise and chaos, there were pockets of quiet beauty, moments of shared humanity that made the struggle worthwhile. The music became her voice, a powerful, resonant cry against the silence, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. And as the day of the talent show drew closer, a quiet determination settled within her, a steely resolve that whispered, "Let them see." The fluorescent lights of Toledo Central Middle School hummed, a dull, insistent drone that mirrored the low thrum of anticipation for the annual talent show. The air crackled with a nervous energy, a mixture of excitement and the slightly acrid scent of hairspray and cheap cologne. Nia Forrester clutched the worn leather case of her violin, its smooth surface a familiar comfort against the clammy skin of her palm. Each footstep echoed in the hollow hallway, amplified in the cavernous space of her own apprehension. She could feel the stares, the whispers, like phantom touches against her skin. "They're talking about you," a voice inside her head whispered, cold and sharp. "They're waiting for you to fail." She navigated the crowded corridors, head down, a shadow slipping through the vibrant tapestry of adolescent energy. Snatches of conversation reached her, fragments of sentences that pricked at her like thorns. "Who's Nia Forrester?" The question, laced with casual indifference, hung in the air, followed by a snicker. "She's that girl with the violin, probably going to play Mary Had a Little Lamb and cry." The words hit her like a physical blow, a punch to the gut. Nia's fingers tightened around the violin case, her knuckles bone-white. A wave of nausea washed over her, the familiar taste of fear rising in her throat. She wanted to disappear, to melt into the faded linoleum floor and become invisible. But her feet kept moving, propelled by a force stronger than her fear. She found refuge in the quiet dimness of the auditorium backstage. The heavy velvet curtains, still drawn, exuded a musty smell, a blend of dust and forgotten performances. The air vibrated with the muffled sounds of the last-minute preparations. Nia retreated to a secluded corner, the weight of the violin case grounding her. She opened it slowly, the hinges creaking a mournful melody. The polished wood of the violin gleamed under the dim lights, a silent promise. She ran her fingers lightly over the strings, the familiar vibrations a soothing balm against the chaos in her mind. "You doing original? Or something famous?" The voice startled her. Malik stood a few feet away, his presence a quiet anchor in the storm of her anxiety. He was one of the few people who acknowledged her existence, who saw beyond the shy, quiet exterior. His eyes, dark and thoughtful, held a flicker of understanding, a silent reassurance. "Original," Nia replied, her voice barely above a whisper. The word felt heavy, laden with the weight of her hopes and fears. She closed her eyes, the melody of her composition swirling in her mind, a complex tapestry of emotions woven into sound. The whispers outside intensified, the murmurs of speculation growing louder. Bets were being placed, odds calculated on her potential for failure. The thought sent a shiver down her spine. She could almost feel the weight of their expectations, the pressure to conform to their preconceived notions of who she was, of what she could do. Backstage, Mr. Buckley, the PE teacher overseeing the talent show, clapped his hands together, his voice booming with forced enthusiasm. "All right, people, let's get this show on the road." His words were met with a mixture of cheers and groans. The energy backstage crackled, a palpable tension in the air. Miss Dorsey, the math teacher, her lips pursed in a perpetual sneer, exchanged a knowing glance with Mr. Buckley. Nia saw it, the silent communication, the shared mockery. The sight tightened the knot in her stomach. Mrs. Tran, the art teacher, approached Nia, her smile a warm contrast to the coldness of Miss Dorsey's gaze. "You'll do great, Nia," she whispered, her voice a gentle encouragement. Nia nodded, the words a small flicker of warmth in the chilling air of anticipation. But even Mrs. Tran's kindness couldn't fully dispel the cloud of doubt that hung over her. The curtains parted, revealing the brightly lit stage. The roar of the audience washed over Nia, a wave of sound that threatened to engulf her. One by one, the performers took their turns, each act met with varying degrees of applause and enthusiasm. Nia watched from the wings, her heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird. Finally, her name was called. The spotlight blinded her as she stepped onto the stage, the violin clutched tightly in her hand. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the nervous thump of her own heart. For a moment, she was paralyzed, frozen by the weight of their gazes. Then, she closed her eyes and began to play. The music flowed from her, a torrent of emotions unleashed. The notes soared and dipped, weaving a story of resilience, of defiance, of the quiet strength that lay hidden beneath the surface of her shy exterior. The auditorium was hushed, captivated by the raw power of her performance. Miss Dorsey's sneer faltered, replaced by a flicker of something akin to surprise. Mr. Buckley's forced enthusiasm faded, replaced by genuine interest. Malik, standing in the back row, watched with a quiet smile, his eyes reflecting the light of her triumph. As the last note faded, a stunned silence hung in the air, followed by a thunderous applause. Nia opened her eyes, blinking against the sudden brightness of the spotlight. The faces in the audience blurred, a sea of astonishment and admiration. For the first time, she felt truly seen, truly heard. The invisible girl had found her voice. The silence that had once been a prison had become her sanctuary, her weapon, her power. The squeak of sneakers on the polished gym floor echoed in the cavernous space, a discordant counterpoint to the nervous flutter in Nia's chest. The air, thick with a mingled sense of hairspray and anticipation, felt heavy, oppressive. Each breath she took seemed to catch in her throat, a physical manifestation of the invisible wall that separated her from the rest of the school. She stood backstage, clutching her violin case, its smooth, worn surface a familiar comfort in this sea of unfamiliar faces. The amplified laughter and chatter from the audience beyond the curtain felt miles away, a world she didn't belong to. "They're waiting for you to fail," a cynical voice whispered in her mind. She pushed the thought away, focusing instead on the weight of the violin in her hand, the cool, smooth feel of the wood against her skin. This, at least, was real. This was hers. The gym's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sterile glare on the makeshift stage. Nia could hear Mr. Buckley's amplified voice announcing her name, each syllable echoing the uncomfortable spotlight she was about to step into. Miss Dorsey's earlier comment, a barbed, "Let's see what our little ghost can do," echoed in her memory. The casual cruelty, the amusement in the math teacher's eyes, it had been a familiar sting, a constant reminder of her invisibility. But they don't know, Nia thought, a flicker of defiance igniting within her. They don't know what's inside. As the curtain creaked open, Nia stepped onto the stage. The sudden hush of the audience, a palpable weight. Hundreds of eyes, curious, expectant, some openly dismissive, bore into her. The gym, which had seemed vast and echoing moments before, now felt claustrophobic, the silence amplifying the frantic beating of her heart. She felt a tremor in her hand as she lifted the violin, the familiar weight suddenly unfamiliar, heavy with the weight of their expectations, their doubts. They're waiting for a joke, she thought, the bitterness rising in her throat. But I won't be their joke. She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath, and placed the bow on the strings. The first note, pure and resonant, sliced through the silence, a fragile thread of sound in the vastness of the gym. It was a tentative note, a hesitant step into the unknown. She felt a moment of panic, the familiar fear threatening to overwhelm her. "They're looking at you," a voice inside her whispered. "They're judging you." But then another voice, stronger, more insistent, rose above the fear. "Play." And so she played. The melody, a haunting piece she had composed herself, began to unfold. Each note a carefully placed step, a deliberate act of defiance against the silence, the indifference, the expectations. The initial hesitant notes blossomed into a cascade of sound, a torrent of emotion pouring forth from the heart of the wood, through her fingertips, into the air. The music swelled, filling the gym, weaving a spell of sound that held the audience captive. It spoke of loneliness, of the quiet ache, of invisibility, of the yearning for connection. It spoke of the strength that lay hidden beneath the surface, the quiet power of a voice waiting to be heard. Nia lost herself in the music, her world shrinking to the space between her and the violin. The faces in the audience blurred, their whispers fading into the background. The gym, the stage, the expectations, all of it dissolved, leaving only the music, a vibrant, living thing that pulsed with her own heartbeats. She poured every ounce of her suppressed emotions into the performance, the joy, the sorrow, the anger, the hope, all channeled through the strings, transforming into a language that transcended words. As the final notes faded, a profound silence descended upon the gym. It was a different silence than the one that had greeted her, not the expectant silence of anticipation, but the stunned silence of awe. Nia stood, bathed in the soft glow of the stage lights, her chest heaving, her fingers still tingling from the vibrations of the strings. The silence stretched, a fragile thread suspended in the air. Then a single person began to clap. Another joined in, then another, and another, until the silence erupted in a thunderous applause, a wave of sound that washed over her, a tangible expression of the connection she had yearned for. In the quiet aftermath, as the applause subsided, Mrs. Tran approached her, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "You made them feel it," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Nia met her gaze, a small, uncertain smile playing on her lips. The words, simple yet profound, resonated deep within her, a validation of the power she had unleashed, the power of her voice, finally heard. Even Mr. Buckley, his usual jovial demeanor replaced by a look of quiet respect, offered a nod of acknowledgement. Miss Dorsey, though her expression remained carefully neutral, avoided Nia's gaze, a flicker of something akin to discomfort in her eyes. Malik, standing at the edge of the stage, gave her a shy smile, a silent acknowledgement of the shared understanding that existed between them. Back in the quiet sanctuary of her apartment, the echoes of the applause still ringing in her ears, Nia carefully placed her violin back in its case. Her mother, her face etched with quiet pride, simply squeezed her shoulder, a silent language of love and support that spoke volumes. Miles, her younger brother, oblivious to the emotional weight of the evening, tugged at her hand, his eyes wide with childish wonder. "You were loud, Nia," he exclaimed. Nia smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. Loud. Yes, she had been loud. And finally, she had been heard. The fluorescent lights of Toledo Central Middle School hummed a monotonous tune, a stark contrast to the chaotic symphony of voices that usually filled the hallways. Nia walked, her violin case bumping gently against her leg, a rhythm that echoed the hesitant beat of her heart. It was Monday, and the air still vibrated with the aftershocks of Friday's talent show. She hadn't expected this shift. The invisible cloak she had worn for so long, woven from threads of quiet observation and overlooked existence, seemed to have thinned, almost translucent. Heads turned. Whispers followed her like shy shadows. She wasn't used to this. Being seen. Nia's hand tightened on the worn leather of her violin case. Was this what it felt like to exist, truly exist, within the buzzing hive of middle school? It was disorienting, like stepping out of a soundproof room into a crowded market. The sudden influx of awareness, of being noticed, prickled her skin. Her usual refuge, the anonymity of the overlooked, was gone. The cafeteria, a battlefield of clattering trays and shrieking laughter, was usually a place Nia avoided. Today, she found herself drawn to it, compelled by a strange magnetism. The low hum of conversation seemed to dip, momentarily, as she entered, a ripple spreading through the chaotic waters. She could feel the weight of gazes, curious, assessing. It was a stark contrast to the usual indifference. Before, she had been a ghost, drifting through the crowded space unnoticed. Now she was solid. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. She saw Malik at their usual table, a small haven tucked away in a corner. He offered a small, knowing smile, a silent acknowledgement of the change. "Hey, Nia," he said, his voice a quiet anchor in the sudden storm of attention. "That was wow." He trailed off, shaking his head slightly, as if still processing the power of her performance. Nia nodded, her throat suddenly tight. The memory of Friday night, the spotlight, the hush of the crowd before the first note, the surge of emotion pouring through her fingertips and into the strings, it was all still so vivid. "Thanks," she managed, the word barely a whisper. The vulnerability she felt surprised her. She had poured her soul into that performance, a desperate act of defiance against the crushing weight of invisibility. Now exposed, she felt strangely defenseless. She was halfway through her lunch, picking at the tasteless pasta, when a shadow fell over the table. Mr. Buckley, the PE teacher, stood there, a slightly bewildered expression on his face. "Amazing job Friday, Nia," he said, his voice booming across the table. "Really? Didn't know we had such talent hidden away." Nia's stomach clenched. The hidden away stung, a reminder of the years she'd spent blending into the background. "Thank you, Mr. Buckley," she replied, forcing a neutral tone. Her internal monologue, however, was a whirlwind. Did he even know her name before Friday? Had he ever truly looked at her? The casual dismissal, the subtle mockery she'd endured, the feeling of being erased it all rushed back. Yet, beneath the resentment, a flicker of something else ignited. Recognition. It was a bittersweet victory. As Mr. Buckley moved on, another figure approached, hesitant, almost apologetic. It was Miss Dorsey, her math teacher. Nia's grip tightened on her fork. The memory of Miss Dorsey using her as the punchline of a classroom joke, the ripple of laughter that had followed, was still fresh. Nia braced herself. "Miss Forrester," Miss Dorsey began, her voice uncharacteristically soft. Nia looked up, her gaze steady, unwavering. She saw a flicker of something in Miss Dorsey's eyes, a hint of discomfort, perhaps even regret. "I owe you an apology," Miss Dorsey continued, her gaze dropping to the floor. "I shouldn't have made assumptions." The words hung in the air, thick with unspoken implications. Nia's mind raced. An apology? From Miss Dorsey? The woman who seemed to embody the school's casual cruelty? It felt surreal. "You should have seen me before Friday," Nia said, her voice quiet but firm. The words, simple yet loaded, hung in the air, a testament to the years of being unseen, unheard, and underestimated. Miss Dorsey's cheeks flushed slightly. She opened her mouth as if to speak, then closed it again, a flicker of understanding crossing her face. She nodded, a brief, almost imperceptible movement, and walked away. Nia watched her go, a strange mix of emotions swirling within her. Satisfaction? Perhaps, but also a lingering sadness. A recognition of the shared human experience, the capacity for both cruelty and change. The bell rang, signaling the end of lunch. As Nia gathered her things, she felt a hand on her shoulder. It was Mrs. Tran, the art teacher, her face warm with a genuine smile. "That was breathtaking, Nia," she said, her voice filled with admiration. "Absolutely breathtaking." Nia met Mrs. Tran's gaze, a warmth spreading through her chest. Mrs. Tran's quiet support, her unwavering belief in Nia's talent, had been a lifeline in the sea of indifference. "Thank you, Mrs. Tran," Nia replied, a genuine smile finally breaking through the guarded facade. In that moment, surrounded by the lingering echoes of her performance, the shifting perceptions, and the complex undercurrents of the school's social dynamics, Nia felt a surge of hope. She had found her voice, not just in the music, but in her own quiet, unwavering strength. The invisible girl was gone, and in her place stood someone new, someone seen, someone heard, someone real. The apartment was quiet, draped in the dusky hues of early evening. The lingering scent of reheated spaghetti clung to the air, a familiar comfort in the stillness. Nia stood by the window, the city lights blurring into a hazy, indifferent tapestry. Her violin case lay open on the worn rug, the instrument nestled inside like a sleeping creature. The reverberations of the applause, the stark silence before it, the weight of every gaze, it all echoed in the hollow space within her. It was a strange sensation, this sudden shift from invisibility to a spotlight, so intense it almost burned. Her fingers absently traced the smooth curve of the window pane, cold against her skin. The glass was a barrier, separating her from the sprawling cityscape, just as an invisible wall had always separated her from the bustling life of Toledo Central Middle School. Had that wall finally crumbled? Or had she simply punched a hole through it, a jagged, defiant opening? "Nia," her mother's voice, soft as the worn fabric of the sofa, broke the silence. Monica Forrester stood in the doorway, her face etched with a weariness that went deeper than the day's work. Yet, in her eyes, a quiet pride glimmered. It was a subtle thing, easily missed, but Nia saw it. She always saw it. Nia turned, a faint smile touching her lips. It was an unfamiliar expression, still tentative, like a butterfly testing its wings. "I'm home." Her mother crossed the room, her steps hesitant, as if approaching a fragile bird. She reached out, her hand hovering over Nia's cheek before gently cupping it. "You did it." Her voice was barely a whisper, laden with an unspoken understanding that transcended words. Nia closed her eyes, leaning into the warmth of her mother's touch. It was a haven, a silent affirmation of a truth she often struggled to grasp herself. "I did it." The words reverberated within her, a strange mix of triumph and disbelief. "Miles is asleep," Monica murmured, her thumb gently stroking Nia's cheekbone. "He was asking about your performance all day. Said he wanted to hear you play like a superhero." A genuine smile bloomed on Nia's face. Miles, her little brother, with his boundless enthusiasm and unwavering belief in her magic. He didn't see the shy, quiet girl everyone else saw. He saw a superhero. Perhaps, in his own way, he was right. He wouldn't understand, Nia whispered, her voice catching in her throat. "It wasn't like that." "Maybe not," Monica said, her eyes holding Nia's with a steady gaze. "But sometimes it's enough to just play, to let your voice be heard." Nia swallowed, the lump in her throat refusing to dissolve. Her voice, for so long, it had been trapped, a prisoner of her own insecurities, of the suffocating indifference that permeated the halls of Toledo Central. Miss Dorsey's sneer, Mr. Buckley's dismissive wave, the whispers and giggles that followed her like a shadow, they had all conspired to silence her. But tonight, something had shifted. Tonight, her voice had soared, a defiant melody cutting through the apathy. They ate dinner in comfortable silence, a rare moment of shared peace in their small, cluttered world. The rhythmic clinking of forks against plates was the only sound, a quiet counterpoint to the symphony of thoughts swirling within Nia's mind. Miss Dorsey's face, momentarily frozen in surprise, flashed before her eyes. Mr. Buckley's slow clap, almost reluctant, yet undeniably present. Malik's small, encouraging smile. Mrs. Tran's gentle nod of approval, a beacon of warmth in the vast expanse of indifference. "I hope they never forget," Monica said, breaking the silence. Her voice was soft, almost wistful, yet there was a steeliness beneath it. It was the voice of a woman who had endured much, a woman who understood the weight of silence and the power of breaking free. Nia met her mother's gaze, a flicker of understanding passing between them. "Yeah," she said, her voice stronger now, steadier. "I'm good." Not everyone clapped, because they cared, but sometimes that's enough. Later, after the dishes were washed and Miles was tucked into bed, Nia sat on the fire escape. The cool night air a soothing balm against her skin. The city lights twinkled below, a vast, impersonal expanse. Yet tonight, it didn't feel so distant. Tonight, she felt connected, a part of something larger than herself, larger than the suffocating confines of Toledo Central. She closed her eyes, the melody from her performance echoing in her mind. It wasn't just a song. It was a declaration, a refusal to be silenced, a testament to the quiet strength that had always resided within her, waiting for the right moment to bloom. The indifference wouldn't vanish overnight. The whispers might continue, but something had fundamentally changed. She had found her voice, and in doing so, she had discovered a power she hadn't known she possessed. The power to break free, to rise above the noise, to create her own melody in a world that often tried to drown it out. And that, she realized, was more than enough.